The Dragon Hunter's Great Katana is the best katana for dealing with dragons and humans and ogres and bosses and anything in between, really, because of the Dragon Wound Slash, which is a super fun weapon skill that absolutely melts enemies. Let's go! Let me know what build you would like next in the comments down below. Really, the only thing you need for this build is the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana, which comes from the Dragon's Pit, where you'll need to head south from the entrance to Castle Ensis and follow this little path until you find the Dragon's Pit. At the very bottom of that, there will be a boss, which I'm intentionally not showing you for spoilers. After you beat that boss, he will drop this weapon, and then you've got the Great Katana. Now, if you don't want to go that route, you could just use like the basic Great Katana you can get super early in the DLC. It's actually, funnily enough, guarded by a dragon. You just need to walk up. You can pick this up without fighting the dragon. It's just in the gravesite plains. Now, what's really special about this katana, not the standard one, is the unique Ash of War. It really, what makes this weapon stand out is when you charge the attack, you get like that wave that actually shoots out that does heaps of damage. Because you also jump up in the air, I've noticed a fair few times that I'll just like avoid attacks without even meaning to, just while enemies are like sweeping at the ground or like trying to attack me when I was on the ground. It's very similar to like Marika's hammer in that way. As you sort of jump up in the air, you avoid any of those ground or like lower attacks, which because the hitboxes are so clean, it makes that really easy. And you can combo this perfectly with any of those, you know, talismans like the Godfrey icon for additional damage for charged attacks. I'm quite enjoying the new Great Katana weapons in general. Like their movesets are really good, like the combos between the slashing and like the piercing attacks without being too slow like some of the larger weapons in like the base game are, which is something I don't really like about the larger weapons, right? Like that's why I typically stick to the smaller weapons just as a personal preference, but I like this sort of hybrid in the middle. We're getting a couple of these options, like a few other ones, and like a build that I'm working on for tomorrow as well. Now, equipment-wise, you've got the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana. You'll be two-handing this most of the time, or like either having the Dragon Communion Seal in your offhand for a few cheeky spells here, which we'll cover in a little bit. And I'm using that seal because it does scale with Arcane, which we're using a little bit to add to the fantasy of this Dragon Hunter by using some of the Dragon incantations, plus its low requirements to wield. I was technically wearing the white mask as well, as the Great Katana does have blood loss build-up, but it barely ever triggers, like just because of the slower attack patterns and because you're leaning into the Ash of War as well, which doesn't add the blood loss bleed up unless the blade hits it. So you won't really have it trigger that much, but it costs nothing to like wear the helmet and get that little bit of attack power when it does trigger, so you may as well. Otherwise, I'm wearing the Malformed Dragon armor set just to fit the overall aesthetic. Now, talisman wise, Godfrey icon to increase the damage of your charge spells and skills. Obviously, we know where we're using that. Shard of Alexander for the same reason, to boost the attack power of skills. Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman because enemies hurt. And otherwise, you've got a few options here, right? You could run Carrion Filigree Crest to lower the FP of your skills. You could play around with the Crusade Insignia like I have. Now, I was originally thinking about using like the Lord of Bud's Exaltation, right? Because of the blood loss and get the attack power from that. But because it doesn't trigger that much, I've been playing around with this new talisman called the Crusade Insignia, which raises your attack power after defeating an enemy, which isn't bad, right? And you do defeat enemies a lot. It's, you know, sort of the main focus of the game, I guess. So I've been using this talisman for a little bit of extra attack power, and you can get this pretty early as well. It comes from the Ballarat Tower settlement. There is a Fire Knight Quilin, I think I'm saying that right, probably not, NPC invader not too far from the small private altar. They'll actually talk to you when they do appear, so you'll know when you're close to them, and once you defeat them, they will drop this talisman for you. I also really like and highly recommend using the two-handed turtle talisman somewhere in this build as well. This greatly increases your stamina recovery. Now this build, especially the Ash of War, is so stamina hungry. It's like the trade-off for the amount of damage you're getting from this, right? Now if you want to get this talisman, which is an upgrade to the normal turtle talisman, it's actually east of the Rivermouth Cave. In order to get down into like this section of the map, you do have to travel a little bit and go through like past south of the Castle Ensis and then like down this little pathway to the poison swamps and then through this little cave, and you'll be able to come out of this other side, and then past the waterfall here you'll be able to find the two-headed turtle talisman for you to pick up. And as I mentioned, I am using some spells here. Now I'm using the classic Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, like we don't really need to talk about that, and you can use Ezekiel's Decay here for a little bit of Scarlet Rot build-up, or like any of the others, right? You could use like the Poison Breath or something like that if you do want to get some status effects triggering here, is why I've sort of gone with that route. I've also played around with Dragon Claw and Dragon Maw. I do like both of these. Dragon Maw especially because of its poise damage. It breaks the stance of enemies very quickly. Dragon Claw is pretty good as that as well, and you know, because we've got such a strong weapon with physical damage here, we can follow up with critical hits pretty easy. In that case, you could run that new talisman to increase your attack power and critical hits as well. Now, I've also played around with Swarm of Flies for that blood loss build up, and just to give a little bit of a ranged option. Now, you can change this up, right? You could run any of the other like ranged faith spells that you see fit, like any of the other spells that you want to use, any of the other dragon incantations, what have you. But that's just sort of what I've played around with here. It's really up to your personal preference, right? Whatever fits within your build, but they're the ones that I've chosen to go with just to fit this overall like role play aesthetic of like the dragon hunter. You can go that route plus the little bit of extra blood loss. For attributes for this build, now I am at level 200 and this is like new game plus 3, I believe I'm currently on. So, you know, if you're obviously at a lower level, you can scale your stats to see fit, but you definitely need at least 50 vigor. I'm running 30 mind and 30 endurance. Now, if I had more levels, I probably would put both of these up a little bit more because of how FP and stamina hungry this build is. You need at least the 30 endurance here, right? Just so you can stay in like medium load. But if you've got those extra points, like you're, you know, in the DLC at a much higher level, definitely pump both of those up. And then strength and dexterity, you should level pretty evenly as the weapon scales pretty like evenly between both strength and dex. So leveling both of those up pretty comfortably is what you want to do. And then for faith, I'm sitting at 25. So I've got Golden Vow and then access to most of the dragon incantations. Same with Arcane, that's currently sitting at 20 for that exact same reason, to get a lot of those spells available to me. So I'm only really hitting the points that I need in those. But if you want to invest more into faith and Arcane, you definitely can. But that's sort of the direction that I've gone for this build. And some build tips here. Now, there's a fair few things you think of for buffing, right? So for your Great Rune, Radahn's Great Rune is the option you want here for the FP and the stamina. We've already talked about why they're so important. Likewise for your Crystal Tier, running the green spell Crystal Tier for more stamina, and the Spike Tier for the extra damage on charged attacks are both fantastic for setting up in those fights. And obviously you want to buff with Flame Gammy Strength and Gold Vow before you enter any of those big fight encounters. One thing I would say as well is to don't get too greedy with the Ash of War. Like your basic attacks here deal a solid amount of damage because this weapon has really good physical damage scaling on its own. So you don't have to like lean super into the Ash of War and just like spam it in those encounters. The attack combos here are great to just like standard use anyway. Plus, you know, you've got the option to bail out of attacks, which, you know, a lot of the DLC bosses are super aggressive. So having like a high committed build, like, you know, we typically might have seen like pre-DLC where you can sort of like set up all of like, you know, this massive attack that takes forever to wind up. You can't really do that as much in the DLC, at least what I've found so far. We probably will be able to eventually, right, once we figure out attack patterns and stuff. But, you know, that I've just found that being able to weave between the Ash of War and then the basic combos is probably the best for this weapon. Just something to think about, not to just spam it, you know, as you would with some other weapons that have these unique Ash of Wars on them. The weapon also has an anti-dragon effect on it as well, but, you know, that doesn't really come into play very much. I just thought I would call it out in case anyone is looking at the weapon description. But there is some really cool dragon stuff later in the DLC as well. But I wanted to focus on like early DLC things here and avoid spoiling anything, like showing any bosses or anything like that, and just sort of focus on the weapon, right? Like without showing too much. But let me know if you're interested in like a fully maxed out dragon hunter with all the new kit in the comments down below. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.